Okay, we're live.
Yep.
Welcome to another Security Ledger Hangout, and we're here once again talking with our friend Per Thorsheim from the PasswordsCon. Per did a hangout with us way back when, around Passwords 12, and we're talking today about Passwords 14, which is coming up next week in Las Vegas, August 5th and 6th. It's going to take place at the Tuscany Hotel and Casino in Las Vegas, alongside the B-Sides Las Vegas conference. And PasswordsCon is kind of the premier technical conference focused on password, both password security, password cracking, anything having to do with passwords and authentication. This is the show for you. Per is in Bergen, Norway, and he's joined us via Google Hangout. Per, thanks for coming on and talking to the Security Ledger. Welcome.
Yeah, hey, thanks for having me.
We're pleased to. So we tried to do this one time before, and Google kind of ate the Hangout. So let's try it again, and I think we'll get it right this time. Tell our audience, tell our viewers, in a few words, just what is PasswordsCon and what can you find there?
Well, PasswordsCon is the first and only conference in the world, as far as I know, that is only about passwords and PIN codes. And this time around, second time in Las Vegas, it gathers security professionals and academics from 6 different world continents, to essentially talk about passwords and PIN codes for 2 days, 2 full tracks both days.
Wow. What types of issues, what types of questions, technologies are on display there? What could you find if you went?
Well, the typical thing that we usually are, doing a conference only about passwords, people will say that isn't that a very incredible narrow field to to look into? But we have talks that talk about to do resets, how to store passwords properly, how to crack them, how to send them properly over the internet. There's a lot of psychology involved, like how does the human brain works when you're creating patterns for passwords and PIN codes. And I would say the talks are also medical talks.
There's been a lot in the news in the last year, 2 years about how passwords are not reliable, or certainly the way most people use passwords are not. They're not doing a great job of protecting their sensitive information online. What's your take on that? I mean, I've talked to you before, and I hear in you that you are kind of bullish on passwords. You don't necessarily. I think you think sort of some of what's been written about passwords and how passwords are ineffective is maybe going too far. That there need to be changes, but that passwords in and of themselves are not going away.
No, they're absolutely not going away. Not, personal opinion. They're not going to go away in my lifetime, to be honest. But one of my main concerns is that we are still blaming end users for creating and using very weak passwords and using the same password across different services. I'm trying to move our focus away from that and look more into how companies, organizations, special service providers on the internet are actually sending, resetting, and storing your passwords. Because as recent breaches over the past couple of years have shown us, most service providers are actually storing your password in a way that is absolutely not acceptable in 2014. Period.
Right. And you, I know the opening keynote for your first day is Julia Angwin, who is a kind of reporter, and she did some very interesting work looking at how, just from a kind of consumer standpoint, how she went about securing her sensitive data. Tell us a little bit about Julia and why you asked her to be your opening keynote address.
Well, Julia is an award-winning investigativist. She's currently working for ProPublica in the U.S. She's been with Wall Street for many, many years, and she essentially did take time off for a full year, looking into her own privacy or lack of privacy online, and everything related to her own personal life in the U.S. So she wrote a book, Dragnet Nation. I would recommend it to read it. The interesting thing by reading the book and talking a lot to Julia, she says that she's your everyday normal consumer reporter, mother, a family member, and that deeply involved into computer technology and stuff. And she she had a lot of experiences during her work trying to secure her own privacy. And I would say the book is deeply concerning, and I contacted Julia and asked her if she could do a keynote at PasswordsCon, basically because, first of all, it will be actually the first time we have a computer geek speak conference. Second, I really want to hear the normal consumer take on passwords. And this conference is a little bit more about not just cracking passwords and storing them. It has a lot to do with security and privacy for all of us. And that's basically the reason for why I invited Julia, and I was really happy when she said yes, I'd like to come and do the keynote.
Right. A little, and I think that's a really important. I think that's a really important point that you make, which is that many of the protections that consumers really only have a limited amount of control or responsibility over some of this stuff. That some of the problems that have been exposed have nothing to do with users choosing weak passwords, but in fact have to do with the technology and infrastructure that is running behind the scenes and kind of supporting those password features. I know one of the features of past password, God bless you, past PasswordsCons, and it's a feature this year as well, is technology that folks who are really very involved in this technology, password security and the issue of passwords and passkeys, use to crack passwords and basically show what the limits are to particular passwords or password hashes, passwords of specific lengths. Certain types of encryption are used to crack passwords. And I know, just looking at your schedule, that there are quite a few presentations at Passwords 14 on different technical approaches to password cracking and also password security. Could you give us kind of an overview of what's going to be on display out in Las Vegas next week when it comes to password cracking in particular?
Well, for password cracking, there's we do talk about brute force attacks, which is basically having a massive amount of computing power and to try absolutely all possible combinations. That really does has its limitation, even if you have massive computing power available. So the other approach is to do, let's say, call them logical attacks. You will have to figure out the patterns that people are using passwords, and this is a lot of psychology, and apply those patterns when creating passwords and passphrases that you think people are using, and then use those to look for finding and cracking the correct passwords. There are also discussions during the conference that are related to the password hashing competition, which is an ongoing moment where the goal is to come up with a new and improved way of storing your passwords in different types of computer systems. And several of the talks are deeply related to that competition, which will be introduced by Jean-Philippe Ormerson from Switzerland. There are also more practical stuff, like one talk about the PCI DSS standard for how to store and handle credit card transactions, including passwords and PIN codes. And there are also several other talks that are related to, as an example, corporate environments and how do they store and send passwords in corporate environments. So there are many different approaches to this.
Right. One of the dynamics, obviously, within the passwords field is that obviously the more computing power you can harness, the less secure any particular password technology becomes, right? Because a lot about password, like you mentioned, brute force attacks, that's just a fancy way of saying you just keep trying different options until you find the password that works, right?
Yeah.
Back in the day before computers, that the limits to that were really what you could get a human or a group of humans to do. But these days, of course, you could try hundreds of millions of password combinations per second. Do you think, given the advent of cloud computing, given the advent, we've talked before about very specific types of very fast processors like graphic processing units, GPUs, that are used often in this. Is there a limit? In other words, do you see kind of technology eventually challenging every password security technology, or bringing it to its knees eventually, or is there a kind of safe harbor? Is there a level of security that you can apply, whether that's cryptographic algorithms or what have you, that will be resistant to cracking?
Well, first of all, there's essentially Moore's law that pretty much still applies when it comes to the development of computing power.
Right.
I would say that for the last couple of years, we have seen a tremendous development in analyze password patterns, so that we are essentially beating Moore's law, by the double or triple or quadruple, I would say, in terms of being able to crack longer and more complex passwords. One area that concerns me is, pretty much the Internet of Things. Like, we are moving away from using our desktop computers and laptops, and instead we are running around with, phablets, iPads, and smartphones, and all kinds of devices are coming now. And by that, we are essentially moving backwards in terms of security, in my opinion. Instead of using a password, which is very hard to do on a small screen with a virtual keyboard on the screen, we are going back to using 4-digit PIN codes instead. And if cracking a password is easy, cracking a 4-digit PIN is incredibly easy. We also have, in the development of brute force, as you just show here with the story from that security ledger of 2012, in December 2012, about this 25-month stock created by Jeremy Gosney. And now, at that time, scaling the brute force attacks between multiple computers was, let's say, kind of difficult. Now it has become a lot easier. And as far as I know, Jeremy Gosney and his Stricter group are going to make some announcements at PasswordsCon that will. The story that you brought back in December 2012 is going to look, like ancient Greek history compared to what you most probably will see this upcoming week.
Right.
So something we are doing is, of course, to move forward two-factor authentication, biometrics, hardware tokens, software tokens, and so on. That's a completely different story, and we do talk about some of those issues at PasswordsCon, and we are essentially also looking into having more talks related to two-factor authentication.
You mentioned the Internet of Things, and one of the challenges, as I know you and I have spoken, because we basically did a version of this Hangout that was just for the two of us. One of the things you've said, to your point, there's this desire to kind of push back to simpler passwords, even PINs, numeric only, short numeric identifiers. A point others have made is, in the context of Internet of Things or wearable technology or intelligent connected medical devices, the types of passwords we're used to, which presume that there's a keyboard present and that you're kind of sitting and typing, those aren't necessarily, that model for passwords isn't going to work so well in the Internet of Things, right? So, if you're wearing Google Glass and you're entering your password with eye movements or something, you probably don't want a 10 or 15 digit passcode. Similarly, somebody in an FDA podcast I listened to said, look, a 15 or 20 character password for an infusion pump or a respirator is not a good idea. What happens, given that we're moving into this Internet of Things world? What becomes of the current norm, which is you want an alphanumeric password with special characters, and it should be the longer the better, right?
Well, I mean, there will always be the trade-off between usability and security, and it's not like I'm saying that usability and security are always on the same side on these things. In many cases, I can improve security by improving usability, which might sound like a contradiction, but in some cases, doable. And it's also, of course, in every situation, it is very important to actually do a risk analysis to have a look at, do we actually need anything more than a 4-digit PIN code and complex passwords? If the systems are not online, you can probably do without a password or PIN code at all.
Right.
So the risk analysis perspective is, of course, very important to remember in this. But for this conference, of course, the focus is the passwords and the PIN codes, and not necessarily the overall risk perspective for other talks.
Great. Let's talk about this conference is happening alongside B-Sides Las Vegas. You've done it in the past in Norway, where you're based. What do you get by coming to the United States, and what do you get by holding this really in the shadow of Black Hat and DEF CON?
Well, the last year when we did the conference in Las Vegas, we had 2 days, a single track, and we were approximately 120 people all in all for those 2 days. This time, doing it together, co-locating and cooperation with B-Sides, we suddenly have space for 400 people at PasswordsCon, and if you attend B-Side or PasswordsCon, both are for free. They are both at the Tuscany, and you can move back and forth between all the tracks as much as you like. So, to us, it's an enormous expansion of the conference. We're really looking forward to it this time as well. I think it's going to be, well, I'm not neutral on this, of course, but I think it's going to be a lot of fun. We have many different interesting talks. There are talks that are deeply technical. I'm to say that we have more female speakers than more. And here's a tip for you. If you are really into the deep, hardcore hardware stuff, you need to come listen to Katja Malvoni. She's cooperating with the legendary solar designer of the Open World project and the creator of John the Ripper. And she's doing a technical talk. I've listened to her before, and believe me, it's technical.
All right.
Yeah, it's hardware geek like you never experienced it before. So deeply, highly recommended talk.
I know we were talking with Mark Stanislav on our podcast last week, who's also giving a talk at PasswordsCon about two-factor authentication. And he was saying, PasswordsCon, like, I'm a little intimidated. Like, some of these talks are really technical, and like, I hope I'm up to the standard. But yeah, no, this is not a layman's show. This is if you're deep into the technical side of how to secure and manage data, and also curious about methods for attacking or cracking passwords. This is a conference for you.
Absolutely. Most of the talks talks will be cryptography and deeply technical, but some of the talks also do get into the psychology perspective and usually perspective of passwords and pin codes. So
Sure.
there are talks that do apply to a non-technical audience as well, but of course the majority will be for the technical geeks. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, it's worth noting that, obviously a lot of cyber criminals don't bother cracking password schemes because they don't have to. It's much easier to fool the user into just giving up their password or installing some malware that allows you to see it as they're entering it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Per, thank you so much. I'll ask this because I always ask this. Is there something I should have asked you that I didn't?
Well, the week, my head is absolutely full with ideas and preparing stuff for Las Vegas, people to meet up with, and the only thing I can say, I look forward to see you. I look forward to see absolutely everybody, I guess, attending B-Sides and PasswordsCon. I know personally I will also be around for DEF CON, and if you see me, please, say hi and have fun, enjoy the conference. That's what I can say at the moment.
Absolutely, absolutely. I absolutely will. Per, thank you so much. Per Thorsheim joins us from Bergen, Norway to talk about PasswordsCon 14. It's taking place next week in Las Vegas, and it's happening alongside the B-Sides Las Vegas conference at the Tuscany Hotel and Casino on August 5th and 6th. Check it out, everybody. And Per, where can they follow you online? Your Twitter handle for if they wanted to just follow news from the conference?
Well, we'll be online on Internet Relay Chat on Freenode. The channel is PasswordsCon. They can also check out the hashtag passwords and my handle is my last name, THORSHEIM. So you will find me there.
Okay, and just you broke up a little bit there. The hashtag is Passwords14 or PasswordsCon 14?
Passwords14 is the hashtag on Twitter, yes.
Got it. Per, thanks so much. Enjoy.
Thank you for having me, Paul.
Safe travel. See you in Las Vegas.
See you in Vegas.